All right. What's up, y'all? I'm very excited to be here. Started late today. Let me get some notes out. I don't think anybody's here yet, so I'm just gonna shoot. Oh, hey, look at people popping in. What's up, everyone? Hi, friends. Let me send off a couple notes that I am live because I started at a weird time today. Let's see. Just doing a little. What's up, Ryan? I saw you tweet that you missed Learn with Jason. Have you had a chance to see any of the more recent episodes? We've been doing them on Thursdays at 9:30 to 11 Pacific, but they're all posted on YouTube too. Yeah, I saw you there. Thanks for stopping by. And for anybody who's not aware, I was just on the open source hour with Becca and I think Chris was the other co-host. That was fun. That was a lot. No, John. Sorry, I apologize. But yeah, having a good time. And that got me thinking, which is why I want to talk today about like growth and discomfort and all of those things. So let me finish posting these notes. Let's see. Got to write some alt text. Jason making a bemused. Is that the face I'm making? We're gonna go with that. All right. Here we go. Almost done. And I guess I should probably use the actual link to YouTube. Oh boy, we got a lot going on today. Sup, Jem? Yeah, I think this is a good one to keep rolling on because it's such a good, like, I don't know, I feel like this is something, I don't know why I learned this earlier in my career, but I'm really glad I did. And it's really been beneficial to me. So I like, I sometimes forget that I have learned all of this. And so, you know, any opportunity to talk about it with other folks is a good opportunity, I think. So let me get that one posted, this one posted. LinkedIn is already doing a thing. I don't know how to post on Instagram, so we're going to call that good. I'm going to throw up a little note on the old Learn with Jason Discord. And here we go. All right, we're ready. I'm paying attention. I'm here with you all. So ready to go. If I can find my window again. A bot to post everywhere. Oh my goodness, I know. The problem is that, like, you need a different format everywhere, and I haven't figured out a good way to do that yet because, and like the Twitter API is weird now. You can't really, like, you can kind of schedule posts, but I usually decide what I'm going to do about 20 minutes before I go live. So that's a whole thing. Yeah, the Insta outage is weird. I had a video that I wanted to post today. I wonder if I can post it now. Let's see. Everybody watch me post on Instagram. Is Instagram back up? Oh, it's doing the thing. It's working, y'all. My Instagram is functioning. Cool. Well, a video I just posted earlier today is about to go live on Instagram also. What's up, Becca? How you doing? Thank you so much for running that space. It was very good. Really, really fun to talk about. Lurking, hackathon in progress. Cores, I mean, I feel like Cores is one of those things that once I learned what the header block was, I just started copy pasting it everywhere, and then I've never thought about it since. And that has been wonderful. What's up, Johnny? How you doing? Bro Nifty, what's up? Eddie, hello. Sazad, hello. All right, y'all. So Becca, who is here, was asking really good questions on the open source space today, and it's got me in a mode. So I want to talk about this a little bit, and specifically, she asked me a good question about like, how do you like, for someone, or all right, let me try to get some context in here because I'm all over the place. Let's look at this post that I wrote here, and I'll share my screen, and also let's see this one. Let's get this screen here. All right, so we've got this screen, and then I can share this link. And so the question was around like, why do I have this advice, and like why do I make this recommendation, and what we talked about on the space was like two main reasons. The first one being that, you know, when you have an idea in your head, if you keep it in your head, it never really gets refined because it's never put through any real challenges, right? It just kind of exists in your head in this sort of idealized state where everything goes well and there are no problems. And you have to actually introduce it to reality to find out where your expectations and where your ideals are true, and where they're out of alignment with reality and aren't going to work. And like, this is like a common thing is, if I write a post, sometimes I'll be looking at the post, I'll be like, this is the best one I've ever written. Like, this is good. This is the one that's going to go mega viral. This is the thing that's going to get me, contacted to write op-eds for all the major newsletters. Like, clearly this is it. This is the one. And then I'll post it and nobody cares. Right? And you know, that's, in one way, you know, that always hurts my feelings. But in the other way, it's good feedback, because I learned that what I thought was interesting didn't make it to the title. It didn't make it to the pitch for this article. And so people weren't interested enough to read, right? Or maybe the thing that I thought was really interesting just wasn't that interesting. You know, it was interesting to me, but not to everybody else. And that type of feedback is really important, because it helps me understand more about, you know, am I doing this for me? Which is great. I do a lot of stuff for me. If you look back through my blog, some of this stuff I wrote just to entertain myself. And sometimes you're doing stuff for other people. And if you're doing it for other people, you get feedback on like what actually helps somebody understand that you're trying to do that you're sharing some information that could be valuable to them. And then the other reason to share is that you build this trail of progress, and the continuing to ship, whether it's software, blog posts, videos, whatever it is, it puts the signal out into the world that the thing you're doing is improving, and that you're dedicated to it, and that you're trying. And you know, I've now said this like 5 times today, but I always make the joke that the careers, content creation, life, it's a pie eating contest where the prize for winning is more pie. And if you put something out there, you're sending the signal to the world that that's what you do. And so the world will ask you to do it, right? If you advertised yourself as an accountant, people will try to hire you as an accountant, right? So if you want to be an accountant, put that signal out into the world. If you don't want to be an accountant, don't put that signal out into the world, right? And that, like, that's very broad, like full career, but it's the same in a company setting. You know, I like, one of the big pieces of advice that I've heard like women leaders give to other women is, if you are in a company, don't become the note taker. Like, don't volunteer to be the note taker, because that sends a signal that you're willing to be the note taker, which then, you know what I mean? Like, it sort of becomes a self-fulfilling cycle. And if you're looking at something like, you know, web dev, if you don't want to be the person who works on the database, like if that stresses you out and it's not fun, don't volunteer to do that part of the project, or try to get yourself maneuvered into the parts that you want to work on. Because it builds that trail of like, this is what I do, and this is what I'm good at. I think fake it till you make it is a slightly different thing, because I don't think it's necessarily faking it, it's doing it, right? And you're doing it at a beginner level, but you're not being disingenuous about that. At least I would encourage you not to be disingenuous about that. I think learning in public is a way to send signal about what you want to do, and you're building experience as you're sending that signal. And, you can see the progress that somebody makes over the course of 6 months. And if somebody posts a blog post, it's like, I tried Blender today for the first time, here's what I made. And it's, a circle, a little ball with some shadow on it. You're like, that's cool. You figured out Blender. Like, good for you. 6 months later, they're making, a character, and that character looks super cool. You're like, wow, you have progressed a lot in 6 months. Like, you've got real promise here. I can see the growth. And suddenly you're not thinking of them as they were never faking it, but you see the progress, right? And you're thinking of them as a 3D designer because they've got 6 months of progress, right? And yes, they'd probably still be junior, but like not junior to the point that you wouldn't hire them, and like not unproven junior. Like, hey, look, here's the pile of work that I can use to justify why this is a good hire. That's sort of what I mean. So, I don't think it's, I think it's a big part for me is being willing to not know things. And I think this is part of the title that I chose for today about like growth and discomfort is a lot of growth is being willing to admit that we need growth. And that can be super uncomfortable, because to admit that you don't know something, or that you have a gap in your skill set, especially if that's not something that you've done before, can feel really vulnerable, and it can feel like you're going to get judged for it, right? Like I know that for me, I get a lot of, I feel a lot of anxiety when I have to go into a, like right now, video project, right? Because I'm going in and meeting somebody who's been doing video for 20 years or whatever, and they're an experienced DP, and the director of photography is what that acronym means, and they've worked on all these cool projects, and they've met people that are famous, and they're showing me their reel, and their reel's got like, oh yeah, here's the time that I filmed an interview with Ursula K. Le Guin, and here's the time that I filmed an interview with Big Boy from Outkast or whatever. It's like, wow, you're like doing real video projects. Like, this stuff is cool. Oh, here's this thing that I published on Discovery Channel. Like, holy crap, I'm not doing anything like that, right? And so my imposter syndrome seeps in of like, oh boy, I'm not on that level, right? And so then I get this, like, my first urge is to pretend and say, I know what you're doing. I understand how that works. And if I examine that at all, I'm like, I'm 3 sentences away from showing that that's not true, that I don't understand. And I think that to me is imposter syndrome, is that feeling of like, I'm at risk of exposing myself for not knowing things. And so my way of combating imposter syndrome is to never pretend I know things. I in fact am more likely to pretend I don't know things, because it helps me make sure that I understand them the way that I think I do. And I can't be called an imposter for that, right? Like, I can't be called an imposter for knowing the things that I know, because I know them, right? I'm not faking anything. and so I think a lot about that. You see how quickly someone learns. I think that is very, very, very true. Here's what I learned, here's what I know, here's how I want to keep growing, and then you've created that traction. People see the thought process around your code. But exactly. I mean, this is like, and Rizel, I feel like you're such a good example of this too, because you've done such a good job of like just cataloging everything that you're learning, and like your pivot into what you're doing today with the Web 5 stuff. It's very clear, like I watched you go from like, I'm starting this Web 5 thing to like, you got it now, right? And you can just watch the trail all the way back. And I think that's so cool. But yeah, I think like, thinking about some of the ways that I've been trying to grow, so much of it is built off of my like I want to be good at stuff, right? And you don't get good at stuff if you go to the experts and say I know as much as you, right? It just doesn't work that way. But I really like working with people who know more than me, whether that's in code or video or whatever. But a lot of it is me having to say like, hey, you just use an acronym that I've never heard before. Can you explain what that is? Or like, I know what the thing is, but I don't know what it's called. So can I point at it on the camera and you can tell me what it is? And I feel like a dork every time I have to do that, but then I know, and I don't have to do that thing again. And each of those things is like a step further toward me being an expert, right? Because right now I would say I very much feel like a hobbyist video producer. And depending on who's looking at me from which point in their journey, they might say that is an understatement, or they might say that's an overstatement. I don't know, but I feel like I can make stuff that's pretty good, and I can see a lot of ways that I want to make it better. And all I can do is keep making videos, because if I don't, then all of my advancement is theoretical, because I'll be thinking about ways that I would do it better, but I'm not actually doing it, so I don't know if it's better, and I can't refine that theory, and I'm kind of stuck at this point. What to do when you have a lot of years of experience and they expect a lot from you? I think, so I have pivoted my career a lot. I started out, as a agency, web design. I went into front-end architecture, and then I went into DevRel, and then I built PHP sites for a long time back in the day. And at each step of the way, I've sort of shifted what my experience should be. When I, for example, I went in as a VP at Netlify. I'd never been an executive before. It was, I'd led my agency, but that was not, I don't know, that felt different. And I had managed people, but that felt different. So when I got tapped to take over for Sarah when she left for Google, I was like, they're going to figure out real quick that I have no idea what I'm doing. And so my approach to that was to just tell people, I am good at this part of my job. I've done all of this a lot and I understand it well. This part, though, is brand new to me. And so I think I can do it. I understand what's being expected of me, and I'm going to do my best, but I'm going to make mistakes, and I'm going to have a lot of questions because I don't know how a lot of these things work. So if you're willing to work with me on that, I'm going to progress fast. But if you're expecting me to know all of this out of the gate, we're both going to be really disappointed. And by being upfront about that, I found that I got a little more grace when I made mistakes, and I made some terrible mistakes right out of the gate as a VP because I just didn't know about some of the dynamics and I didn't know how some of the things worked. But when I made those mistakes, instead of it being like, how could you possibly not know this? It was like, hey, you're a VP now. It doesn't work that way anymore. Don't do that again. And I got to grow and not do it again. So I think no matter what level of experience you're at, if you can own that you can both be good and not good at things at the same time, because that's the current state of being for every single one of us. I have my things that I'm very, very good at. If you ask me to go do advanced math or to, I don't know, debug a production performance problem on a Kubernetes cluster, I'm done. I'm toast. I can't do it at all, right? So I'm very good at front end. I'm very good at, I don't know, writing in English. But if you ask me to do if you ask me to write, which I think I'm really good at, but to do it in Spanish, I'm not going to be eloquent. I might be able to get it done, but it's not going to be, I'm not writing poetry. And, so I will always be good and bad at things simultaneously. And I think the trick is to acknowledge your growth areas without discounting your strengths. And that tends to be a way to balance that conversation that let somebody know, I'm not saying I don't know what I'm doing. I'm saying that part of this is new to me. And the new parts I'm going to learn fast, but I'm going to have questions. And if I make mistakes, I'm not doing it because I know the rules and I'm choosing to break them. I'm making mistakes because I'm still learning. And I find that level of candor is usually really good. There are definitely environments where it's not safe, and you have to kind of measure on your own what is and isn't safe. For me, at least, I found that when I have that level of candor, I've been able to have much more productive relationships. Like, it builds trust when you tell somebody, I'm not sure, because then they feel like they can say, well, I'm not sure. And I had a lot of conversations with leadership teams where what I had thought previously, like before I joined the leadership team, I had just assumed that like everybody was old hat. They were all seasoned. They'd done all this before, and they were just kind of making decisions based on their old experiences. And when I got frustrated, I was like, you can't do it like you've always done it. And then I got into leadership and I started sharing like what I didn't know. And all of a sudden the leadership team was much more willing to say like, I don't know, this is the first time any of us has ever seen anything like this. So we don't really know how to handle this. And it made the conversations way more productive because nobody was saying, well, my experience says we should do it like this, because they felt like they had to project that they had the confidence to do it. We could instead say, we have no idea. Like, where do we even start with this? And we could kind of build it up from ground principles and like try to do something constructive without having to put on any airs. But yeah, I think that's a big deal. I know. Wait, hold on. Writing in Spanish is equal to English, but I don't know. Ojalá. Nope, it's not as good. my Spanish is like, I call it taxi cab Spanish. I can get to a place, I can talk about things that are happening right now and that exist in the physical world, but if I got to talk about feelings or the future or the past, toast. Setting expectations early, I think, is so good. Like, yeah, I thought I could build them an entire publishing pipeline in months. I've done the same thing. Yes, that is the worst. Like the hubris of youth when we all believe that we're invincible and every problem is easy. Oh boy. Yeah, no substitute for doing, I think, is the core of it. Like, you're exactly right, Paul, because if you're doing this stuff expecting to be perfect on the first try, it basically paints you into this really tight corner of like, things that I've learned are safe and things I haven't learned are unsafe. And so you can't venture outside of your comfort zone without basically violating your sense of identity, right? And so I think that a lot of what I've been working on myself is this sense of like, I want to be somebody who enjoys the learning for the sake of learning. And a huge component of learning is it has to be something that you need to learn. Like, if you already know it, you can't learn it. So being bad at things is part of the process. Like, I think it's an Adventure Time quote. I never watched that show. I think I need to, but somebody said that I think the quote is, being bad at something is the first step toward being kind of good at something, right? And I think that that's a really good thing to internalize, is that you can't be good at something unless you put in the time to be bad at it and learn. So if something's important, you have to embrace the suck. Like, if you want to be a world-class pianist or a musician, you're not going to sit down and just like bust out a symphony. You're gonna struggle to play chopsticks, and that's okay, because that's part of the process, right? And you will do it, and you'll learn one more thing and one more thing and one more thing, and faster than you might expect, you will be playing a symphony. But you got to do that hard part first. And I think it's the same is true with anything. If you want to be good as a manager, if you want to be good as a coder, if you want to be good as an artist, as a writer, as a public speaker, as a video producer, any of those things, it comes down to getting the reps in. And if you can, publish those reps, because then you get feedback and you can grow really fast. I do this show every week. I do another show every Thursday. So I'm getting 2 reps a week of being live on camera. right? And that has contributed so much to my ability to, for example, stare into a camera as if it was a person instead of being weirded out by the fact that I'm staring into a glass lens. The fact that I can riff like this for 3 hours with y'all without feeling really weird and awkward about it, only sort of weird and awkward about it. That's all due to practice. Like, it's not something, if you look back to 2018 when I first started, I wasn't doing that. I wasn't comfortable. I wasn't eloquent. I was figuring it out, and I just kept getting the reps. But you know, that's all the sort of stuff that you just sort of have to do the thing until it doesn't feel like you're learning anymore. It just feels like you're doing it. Because I also think that's part of what makes, like, the really fun part about learning is when you feel yourself, and you won't even feel it, you'll just notice that it happened one day, where you feel yourself cross over into unconscious competence. Are y'all familiar with this? Do you know the 4 stages of learning? Hold on, let's do a thing. Are these of learning? I think there's probably a graph on this. What? No, get out of there. That's not what I wanted. This is the one I want. Leadership Management Australia. Nobody's going to make a graph? Whatever. I'm going to make a graph. Let's go into here. Can I add another one? It's going to let me add another one. So this is going to be learning. All right. So when you first start learning, or actually before you start learning, you are unconsciously incompetent, right? You don't know that there's a thing that you could or could not know, right? Like, you're blissfully ignorant that the thing was ever there in the first place. There are a lot of things in the world that I could learn, but I'm not even aware that they exist right now. So then the next phase is that you get introduced to that thing and you become conscious of the fact that you're incompetent, right? And that is, like, for example, right now, I have been watching a lot of Instagram and TikTok content about woodworking, because apparently that's the advanced age that I've reached, is that's like my preferred entertainment. But so that, like, when I watch that, I am aware that I can't do it. Like, I know that it's there. It looks really fun. I know I can't do it, but I'm interested, right? And so then you take the next step, which is to go to conscious competence. I'm going to change these. So unconscious incompetence is when you're not aware that there's a thing you don't know. Then you know that you don't know it. And then you start practicing. And with effort, you can be competent. You are consciously, oops, no, I want all of this to go away. I want you there. So you are consciously competent. If you think really hard about it and you practice and you do all the work, you can do a good job. And then when you really get good, it becomes unconscious. And this is where I think some really special stuff starts to happen, because that's when you can just play. And I've talked about this a little bit in the past. Thank you for your help, I guess. Well, whatever. It's close enough. So when you find yourself in this situation, you can't jump to here. And so an example of unconscious competence is breathing, for example. You don't think about doing it. You can do it in your sleep. It is something that comes to you so naturally that you are not, it's not something you have to, like, focus on. For folks who are able to walk, walking is another one. You're not actively thinking about walking, even though it was really, really hard when you were a baby to learn to stand up and walk. So those sorts of things are, like, that's the, when you're first born, like, walking is an example. Again, for folks who are able to walk, you you start out, you're born, you can't walk, and you're unaware that that's even possible, right? And then when you're a baby, a toddler, you start to notice that all these adults they're pretty mobile. They can move around, and that would be cool. So you start trying to figure it out, but you can't. You're aware in whatever baby way that you can't walk, and you start doing the work to try to figure it out. You're trying to crawl, you're rolling, you're trying to stand up with, the couch as a support or whatever it is. And then you get to the point where you can walk, but you're thinking hard. Like when you watch a baby take its first steps, it's like, oh, here we go. I got this. I can do this. And then it gets to the point where it's moving around, it's walking. And then finally, they just, by the time they're whatever age, 4 or 5 years old, they're just like cruising. They're not they're sprinting at the top of their top speed. They're not even aware that they're walking anymore. That's just what they do, right? And so that sort of process, it applies to anything. And with code, with whatever, you realize that you want to develop a new skill. So you go from here to here. And then when you start working on it, you start out bad, you keep practicing, and then you get pretty okay. And if you keep doing it long enough, you cross this barrier where suddenly you're just playing. And that is such a good feeling, like when you can just sit down and play. Because I was talking to my friend Nate. Actually, let me check the chat here before I go on to this next thing. I'm consciously incompetent to some. Yeah, exactly. Let's see. You get to a higher level of skill set. You go from unconscious competence back to conscious competence. So this is really interesting because this is the idea of like deliberate practice, right? Where you have the skill set. Let's see. How do I get this to there we go. You can kind of create a loop here where you get to the point where you can just play, but then you want to level up. And so just playing isn't going to level you up. So you have to choose a thing to focus on. Like you're going to drill on speed or on accuracy or on whatever. And that puts you back into the conscious competence role because I guess it could put you into the conscious incompetence role, and you kind of go back this way depending on how far out of your skill set you're going. But a lot of times, especially with deliberate practice, you move to here where you can do it right if you're paying attention, but you want to get to the point where it's automatic. So that's also a very good point. Doing the thing but struggling with sharing progress. This is a good. Okay, all right. I'm gonna challenge this one hard. All right, and I'm gonna challenge it hard out of love. So I feel like one of the most human things is this belief that any knowledge I have acquired, like any knowledge I don't have, is mysterious and important and useful. And as soon as I've acquired it, it's clearly not useful because if a joker like me can learn this, why would anybody else care? Clearly everybody else already knows this, right? And I think the counterpoint to that, or the companion point to that, is a belief that if someone has covered a topic before, then it doesn't merit being covered again. And to that point, I guess I would point to things like fantasy and sci-fi, right? How many times are we going to write about elves and orcs or spaceships and exploration and aliens? It's very well-traveled ground, right? But that doesn't mean I don't pick up that book and read it, right? Because the author's insight, the author's spin on things adds value that wasn't previously there. And also, for a lot of people, the most valuable thing is the advice from somebody who was there yesterday. Like, if I tried to teach somebody HTML and CSS from scratch today, it's been 20 years. I just can't, I don't think I'm capable of remembering what it's like to not understand this stuff. It's just been too long, right? So someone who's an absolute beginner would probably find me extremely frustrating as a teacher because I'm not going to be able to have that beginner's mind and explain this stuff in a way that recalls what it's like to not understand it, you know? However, somebody who learned HTML and CSS yesterday, they just had to build those mental models. They're going to have a really good insight into how, oh, well, when I was thinking about it, it was like this, and then this clicked, and now I understand how these things work. And that metaphor might be the thing that brings somebody across, or that analogy might be what finally causes it to click for a beginner, and they go, oh, I get it now. I understand what you're saying. So I call it headlight vision. Like when we're working, we can see the things that are directly in front of us and like off to the left and right in front of us, but we're not really looking to the sides, and we're definitely not looking behind. And if we evaluate the things that we know only based on what we're looking at, it's always going to feel like the knowledge is out of date or irrelevant or not that important or not that useful, because we already learned it, right? We got there. And so if we say, if I've learned this thing, it's not worth teaching. Well, remember who you were 3 days ago before you learned that thing, and how much it would have helped you to have somebody explain that topic with fresh eyes. I think the big opportunity for a lot of folks is to recognize that you're not trying to become the world-class expert on every topic. And that's not what a lot of sharing should be, I don't think. I think that there's room for putting together the magnum opus. This is all of the knowledge collected from the world about this topic. But most of us aren't doing that. Most of us learned one thing, it was helpful, and if we share that one thing, then the other people, the small percentage of the world who is a few days behind us and is going to Google that problem tomorrow, will be super stoked that we wrote that post. And that's really, really valuable. And that also, I think, is how we start to develop our own views, is that we'll articulate what we're learning and like what's interesting about it. And we'll start to see the patterns in our own thinking and why, what are we learning? Can I see the trajectory of like what I've learned and what I was excited about? And can I use that to inform what I want to continue learning in the, you can treat it like a journal, like a lot of the stuff I write. If we look at my blog, actually, let's see. If we look at the blog on Learn with Jason and what I publish, this is an error that I had when I was building a project. This is, I had to Google this for like the 5th time. And so I wrote this. I publicized these a little bit, but not really. Like they were mostly just because I know I'm going to Google that again and I'm going to have to look it up. And something like this was just like kind of journaling. Right? I could have also written this and just kept it in my personal files and like looked at it sometimes, and I would have been like, yeah, that was worth writing. These types of posts, they're not meant to be earth-shattering. And I don't think this one I wrote because I couldn't find it when I Googled it. This one existed in a bunch of places, and I felt like none of them were exactly what I was looking for. So I took all that information and combined it into the thing I was looking for. So this is me rewriting something that's been written 1,000 times and doing it for the way that I want to work. And for anybody who likes the way that I work, this will be useful for them, right? And for anybody else, maybe this will be one of their inputs on their own version of the blog that they write later. The curse of knowledge, I think, is a really, really good way to do that. But yeah, I think you're not, it's not about regurgitating. Like, I think if you're just copy pasting notes from somebody else's blog posts, that can be fine. Like you can do those sorts of things as long as you cite your sources. But I do think that I think that's the sort of thing where it helps you get into a mindset of like not feeling like any of this stuff is that big of a deal. You're not doing it with stakes. You're doing it because it was useful. Like it was useful. And the other thing too, and this is just a selfish motivation, every time I write something down, it sticks better. And so if I'm learning a concept and that concept is kind of hard for me to get my head around, I'll write a blog post about it. Not even necessarily to help anybody else, but just because if I write it down and I have to explain it to myself, the concepts slot into my brain a little bit better. And that's the way my brain works. Might not be the way yours works, but I found that for me at least, it's really helpful to kind of use that information to repurpose that information and kind of push it out somewhere else. Let's see. Ooh, yeah, this is okay. Yeah. So, Leon is so good. The 100 devs thing that you may have seen around Twitter and stuff, the hashtag 100 devs, that's Leon. And it's so good as like an onboarding into this industry, like really, really, really good. Great community too, like super active and lots of support there. Yeah, personal logs and notes, second brain style. Yeah, I think that's great. A friend of mine, Alan, does he does a second brain style thing, and he just publishes it. And a couple of them get picked up by SEO, but like he's not sharing the links in like a, I tweet about what I blog way. It's more just whenever he captures a note, he throws it up on his website just in case somebody who's Googling finds that and enjoys it. Logsec. I gotta look this one up. I don't know what it is. Privacy first open source knowledge base. Notes, shortcuts. Okay, so yeah, this is cool. I like this. I've been using. Let me throw a link in here for folks if they want to give it a shot. I use Obsidian. Let's get off the download page though. And what I like about Obsidian is the graph nature of things. So with these sorts of things, you have you can just kind of square bracket, like you can kind of see here, if you square bracket around a thing, it creates a node, and then anything else that mentions that thing will sort of show up in these nodes. It's really cool. And it helps me because I tend to do a lot of like free, like for everything I publish, there's probably another 5,000 words that just kind of sit in free writing, where I'm sort of working through an idea, not to publish, but like to make sure that I'm saying a thing coherently. And those types of notes, I go back and I look at them and I can see where some of my thinking is convergent on some core concept, and then I can pull that out and use the messy writing to turn into a more coherent thing. But yeah, I love that kind of stuff. Yeah, use it to organize the word vomit. Yeah. Obsidian. Yeah. I actually just set up Obsidian for my, where is it? Here. This is how I run my blog now. So I've got it all set up where, like, let's see, here's that drizzle one. So I run these in Obsidian, and then I probably could do something where I could like auto post them over to the thing, but I just do a git commit because I'm too lazy to figure out the automation, and it takes me like 10 seconds. But yeah, this is very much a nice little hack, and it works out really well for me. And then I have two vaults. I have my, like, this one is just my blog, and then somewhere else, might not be open, I have here's my other one. Let's open up daily notes, right? Something like this. And so you get your daily notes, and then if I go, this is my friend Nate, and so if I click in to find Nate, and then I got to open my sidebars, you can find all these anytime that I've mentioned Nate. So like these are good ways to try to figure this stuff out, right? To like notice if I'm talking about a thing a lot. And then you can also find like unlinked mentions. So if you just use the word, but hadn't done the square bracket on it, you can find those there. And so it's a really cool way to do it. And then there's also somewhere in here, I don't know if I'm going to show, I think I'm not going to show my, my graph. Maybe because I won't even be able to find it. There we go. This is my graph. And so you can kind of see, like, over the course of my work, I've put together some really, like, gets a little messy in here. But if I want to dig in, like you can see there's a cluster here. What is it? Oh, 4 web devs, right? So as I work on 4 web devs and I jot down ideas, all this stuff happens and it turns into a cluster. And then over here, those are drafts and those are published things. But so, I've got like these sort of hubs of stuff that's happening as I'm thinking through different things. And it helps me kind of understand what's going on. So anything that helps you organize your thoughts is probably the right call. Let me get this off the screen. I like Obsidian. Their Notion can do this. Sounds like Logsec might be able to do it as well. I don't know. Yeah, Logsec works here. Paper and pen. I can show you my paper and pen. This is how I organize my whole life. And I'm not going to show it very long because I don't want the camera to focus on it because I got a bunch of business stuff in here. But like that's what my day-to-day looks like, is just like constant little jot notes to myself about like, do this, try this, don't forget about this. All that stuff is really, I also use it. This is how I run my to-do list. Like I don't have a digital to-do list. I will sit down with a coffee, or at the end of the day, I'll sit down and manually transcribe my to-do list from page to page, because it's a chance to sort of reflect on what is on my to-do list and whether or not I still think it's the right thing to focus on. Because sometimes I have a thing and it's a good idea and I write it down, and then a bunch of new stuff comes up, and when I look at it, I'm like, I want to do that, but it's not the right time. And so I can like jot a note down in a like ideas for someday box, and then I just leave that to do behind, because it's okay. It's, not every idea, it doesn't have to be a bad idea to get canned. Sometimes it's just not the right time. Well, let's see. Why not build your own custom system? I mean, you can if it's a fun project. I find that a lot of times I'll start building systems, and then I use building the system as an excuse to not use the system. And then I've spent, months planning a thing and I've never actually done anything. That's a big issue for me, is I will use the preparation as a form of what I call productive procrastination. Paper checklist thing. Was it the analog? This is another cool thing that I saw. It's from Ugmonk. Let's see, analog. Yeah, this one. This is a cool thing. This is very much like hipster, like you don't need this, but I thought it was cool. And it has a whole like system of taking notes and doing stuff like that. Yeah, cybernetics is down on the analog system. This is cool though. Like if you do like these sort of like aesthetic things, this whole site is actually really cool. Like the whole system, and then they've got all these other things like this desk set that absolutely I do not need, but I'm definitely trying to rationalize getting. Like all sort. Look at it. Like look at this little phone charger. Look at it. Look at it go. So, anyways, this is all very cool stuff. Definitely worth checking out. All right, where are we at? Oh, you got the analog on your desk right now? Nice. Yeah, I think that's for me too. Like the to-do list is something that, like, it shouldn't feel permanent. Like the whole goal of a to-do list is to finish it. And so if I'm like building this whole software system around my to-dos and I can put anything I want and storage is cheap and all that, if I have to write stuff down every single day, like there's a point where, I mean, I have my to-do list. I just showed this. I'll show it again briefly. But like this whole page, that's all to-dos. Every single thing I've written down is something that I need to do. And I write down everything. Like, there's stuff in here like respond to this email that I've had in my inbox for too long. So it's not all of these are big. In fact, most of these are very small. Like send a follow-up to this person that you're talking to about a project. But it's big, right? And when I look at this, I have to make sure, like, is this a thing that I still want to pursue? Like, if I'm 5 follow-ups deep on somebody and they keep saying like, yeah, we're thinking about it, like, is that really something that I want to occupy mental energy, or do I not copy it to the next to-do list? And I really like that sort of meditation on what I'm doing with my time, and it also helps me with prioritization, because if I'm looking at this list and I write something down and I go, that's been on my list for like 5 days, and that's actually important. Why am I not doing that? Then I'll like put a little star next to it, and it's like, all right, that's the thing I'm doing first. I think that, but if it was just on my list, I don't know, it just might sit there with all the other overdue things that I haven't touched, and I would kind of forget about it forever, right? Pull stuff out. Yeah, so that's sort of me too. Like although I don't pull stuff out of my Obsidian, I don't use Obsidian for to-do tracking at all. But I like the idea of like, you kind of work through a thought, and then when that thought is ready for action, you like physically write it down, and then you've got your notes of like how you got there. As little process as possible. So this is interesting because I love a process. Like I love a process. For me, I like, again, I was talking about this earlier about how much I like to build a system to avoid having to do anything. Like the productive procrastination is strong with me. And so one of my growth areas is like, I have to recognize when am I doing something because I would rather keep thinking about it than work, and when am I setting up a system because it's actually going to make things easier. And with a lot of stuff, like I always think in series. It's one of my blessing and curse kind of things. I feel very strongly that a series is more sustainable as a content approach because it sort of builds some guardrails. However, to build a series, you need to have like a validated idea. And so a lot of times what I'll do is I will spend hours building out a series template before I've ever made even a single episode of it. And that prevents me from getting anything done because I have these huge plans about what it should be and what it could be. And it just, I'm planning to get out of doing. And with to-do lists, I have so many, like I've built templates for myself that I have to fill out, project management systems, really complex calendar setups where I have to review at certain times. And I've gotten software. I've switched software many, many times. If you look through my Notion, it's a graveyard of different project management setups that I've built. And every one of those was really just an exercise of me saying, you know what would be fun? What if I built a Notion project management system that I literally never used? And ultimately, the only thing that I found that works is if what I'm doing is doing stuff, I just need to know what stuff I'm doing, right? And if I write it down, it causes me to reflect on it. I can't have a process because there's no way to automate a piece of paper. You either write it down or you don't, right? So my process is write it down, do it. Anything that's not crossed off, move it to the next day. And you go through that process of reviewing as you write down. Any process beyond that, I found, is me giving myself a toehold to rabbit hole on something unrelated to actually getting work done. I don't think that's true for everybody, but it is certainly true for me. It's like you're speaking from my brain. Yeah. Let's see, just scanning some stuff. Keeping growth and discomfort in mind, how do you navigate through a period from a layoff to taking up the next job? Ooh. All right. Let's see. Okay. So I'm going to couch all of this by saying that I have not been laid off. I have always left early in companies. I am not loyal to companies. Like it has never been something that I've felt particularly strongly about. Like if a company feels like if the vibe's off, I'm out. Like it doesn't take very long. And I think a lot of that's because I'm very public facing. And so if I sense that a company's about to do something that's going to embarrass itself, I want to be gone before they do that. And also sometimes it's just time to go. Like, I knew that it was time for me to do this Lorem adjacent thing. So all of that to say, I can't come from that experience, but I can come from two different points of experience. One is when I sold my agency and kind of just went into free fall. after I burned out. I had to recover from there. And then the other would be when I initially went into web dev, because I was in a band and the band flamed out and I needed to do something, right? And in both cases, I had opportunities that wouldn't have been good ones. Like when I first started my agency, or I guess it wasn't an agency, I was a freelancer. I was like looking for projects, and I was working at a FedEx Kinko's, and I would do any web dev work I could get my hands on the side as a way of like building up my portfolio and stuff. And I heard about a job as a web designer for a local agency, and I went and I interviewed, and the interview went well, and they offered me the job, and they offered me $30,000 a year. And let's see, this would have been in like 2007 or so in Montana. And so like $30,000 wasn't nothing. Like you can, at the time, I don't think it's true anymore, but at the time, $30,000 was like, okay. Like you weren't like rolling in it, but you could get by. But I felt like it was low. I was like, that seems lower than what I could get. And so I was talking to him about like, well, what's the growth potential and like, how does this work? And they told me that if I stayed there and I kept growing, that I could eventually get up to $36,000 a year. And I just, like, something in me felt like that was going to be a detour as opposed to growth. So I kept looking around, and I found a client who was willing to give me $3,000 for 3 months. So it was like, a $9,000 contract, but it trended toward 36. And I was like, you know what, that's good enough for me to take this risk. And so I did that, and also recognized that in the time that I was doing this 3-month project, I needed to be selling my ass off to make sure that I didn't come out of that 3 months with no prospects. So I was, leveraging the fact that I was doing these projects to show as many people as I could and try to get into meetings and stuff, so that when I came out, I had more prospects. And when I came out, I was able to line up enough that first year after I quit FedEx Kinko's and went full-time on myself, I made $50,000, which was awesome. It was such a validation that I'd made the right call. It led to a lot of other things, like my burnout and all that was a direct result of the way that I went about this. But it sort of validated that I was right, that my growth potential was way higher than this company that, would have me wait several years to get up to $36,000. When I sold the agency, like when I fully burned out, I like just bailed out to Alaska, and I was like, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. And so then I took like one contract, and I just sort of floated along, and I had to figure out how I was going to get back into the industry at all, because I was like out of it entirely. I was in Thailand. I didn't talk to anybody. I wasn't going to conferences. I was like, basically had disappeared. I was like, oh, I'm going to do my digital nomad thing. Maybe I'll never come home. And so when I came back, I had to figure out how to get back into the industry. And what I started doing was reaching out to people that I'd met through conferences. So this was years earlier. I had met people, let's see, I was probably 2015 I started looking. And I had been to conferences up until like 2013 or so. So it had been a couple years, but I was able to reach out to some people that I saw at the same conferences, and I just started, putting feelers out. I was like, hey, we've hung out before at this conference, and you've always seemed cool, and here's kind of my situation, and I just wanted to know if you'd heard of anything, right? And I sent out a lot of those to crickets, and one of them was to Robin Cannon, who at the time was the manager of the front-end dev team at IBM, and he hit me up, and he was like, yo, we actually need somebody who does what you do. Do you want to interview? And so he was the warm intro that got me into the interview pipeline that ultimately got me my job at IBM. So in today's market, I think it's even tougher, because I think that it's real competitive out there for jobs right now. But people are still hiring, and networks make such a huge difference. So I think the discomfort is you have to move into sales mode. Like you are a valuable contribution to a team. Like if a company brings you on, they're bringing you on with the expectation that you're going to return like 10 times the salary that they pay you, right? That's super valuable. And when you do that, like you are joining a company to make it stronger, right? So you're not saying, hey, please give me a job. Like I'm broke, I need a job, help me. You're saying, hey, company, you need to grow and I will help you grow. And it's going to be really worth your while. So let's do this, right? It's mutually beneficial. They pay you, you make them more money. Everybody wins. That's like that mindset shift can help you move over into selling yourself. Like what are the specific skills that you will bring to this team that will make it stronger? And then you can sort of leverage your network in ways that allow you to communicate that, right? Like right now, I'm telling everybody about a job that doesn't exist. Like the thing that I do of dev-focused video production, like the closest thing that exists to that right now would either be full-blown marketing agency, which is what you see, like there's this agency I love called Color. They do the GitHub Universe keynotes, and they do a lot of work with Microsoft, and they do a lot of work with other companies that you've heard of. Or it would be like a YouTube influencer, right? And both of those things are cool things, but it's not what I'm doing, right? I'm somewhere else on that spectrum. I'm like in the middle. And so I'm asking people to give me a job that doesn't exist. But because I'm willing to sell it and because I have really strong convictions about what I'm doing and why it's valuable and why it's like a thing that you do in addition to an influencer campaign or in addition to the in-house DevRel work that you're doing, I'm able to make that case, but I'm doing it all through network. I'm reaching out to people that I know and talking about what I'm doing, and then I get one shot and you leverage that shot to get some visibility so that I can get more people to say, what are you up to? And then I use those as intros and they, you know, I'm constantly, I spend 50% of my time on calls talking to people about what I'm doing and why I think it's cool and how it might help their company. And most of them are like, that's cool. We're not going to do it. Right. I waste in strict like time returned on or value returned on time. I waste a ton of my time just talking about ideas with people. But none of it I would consider wasted because I've had these conversations. Like there are companies I talked to years ago about why I thought this stuff was so cool. And they finally this year, they hit me up and they were like, hey, we heard you're indie. You talked about this stuff a long time ago. I think we want to do it. And so we've, you know, like there's like pay attention to Dev Cycle, for example, because they're about to launch something that I worked on. Pretty excited about that. Like that's going to be really cool. So I don't know. I mean, all of this is very much like this is my personal experience and it doesn't directly parallel to the layoff experience. But I think the biggest things are, and this is maybe advice that I would give to anybody at all, is if you can understand what it is that you're providing. Because you know, you're not like a pair of hands. You're a full human being that contributes to a team beyond just the lines of code you write. So what is it that you're contributing, and start to internalize that and feel what it is that you do that's different. Because I'm sure that there is something that you do that's different. And if you can articulate that, like a great example, Natalie Davis. I don't know if y'all know Natalie, but she rules. Let me find her. That's not it. Oh, there it is. Natalie. So Natalie rules, and is like such a good example of how to like package your own skills as you would a product. And so when Natalie was, she transitioned into tech a few years back. But she came out of managing like retail and was sort of like a chain store manager. She was doing stuff where she was like leading teams. She was dealing with a lot of like inventory things and a lot of like complex stuff, right? And she came in and she didn't say, I'm new to tech, give me a job. She said, I bring all of this experience of managing complex systems across distributed teams. I am very good at organizing information. I'm very good at understanding the needs of people. I'm good at speaking to people of all skill levels, so I can manage up and I can manage down. And, I'm learning the technical skills, but I will learn those quickly because I've demonstrated that I can learn really quickly anywhere else. It was such a no-brainer to hire Natalie. And if she'd come in and said well, I'm a junior, I'm 2 months out of my boot camp, it would have been oh, okay, you're a junior. We get a lot of people saying, I'm a junior, I'm 2 months out of my boot camp, can I have a job? Natalie didn't do that. She came in and she sold us on why she would be a killer addition to the team. And she's delivered over and over again. Every team that she goes to is blown away with her abilities. And so I think that's the sort of thing that this is the potential of it, right? You can reduce your skills down and make your skills small and say, well, I'm new to this industry and therefore only have the same thing to offer as everybody else with no experience. Or you can look at the total of who you are and what you've done and start looking for all the ways that overlapping experience is actually really beneficial. How many engineers have you worked with that had no ability to communicate at all, and they shut down in meetings, they can't articulate their ideas, they're difficult to work with, right? It doesn't matter how technically skilled somebody is if they're not capable of functioning in a team, right? And so to find somebody who is such a skilled communicator who can clearly articulate their value, how they fit into the team, so on and so forth, all of those things is a really strong signal that this is somebody who is high potential and is going to continue growing, right? And so I think that we as engineers, sometimes, I think especially during the pandemic, because demand was so high for software jobs, and it was sort of you could throw a rock and hit somebody who wanted to hire you. Not that you should throw a rock, maybe throw some bread. Right? If you're going to throw something, throw bread, because that's what I want thrown at me. But in the pandemic, I think the demand for engineering talent was so high and companies were hiring so aggressively that we got away with just saying I'm an engineer who wants to hire me, and people would do it. These days, I don't think that's going to be as true. I think we're transitioning into more of a setup where, our job is to clearly articulate our value. And we have to understand that value and be willing to defend that value. But it's there. I think anybody who's feeling nervous about this, if you start digging into what you do a lot, and you know a lot, and you can contribute a lot. But you have to be able to communicate that and be willing to own your contributions. You work in influencer campaigns as a dev. This is actually really important. I got started in DevRel internally at IBM because I would do internal tooling, and nobody's going to use a tool that you built unless you teach them how it's built, how to use it, or why they should use it. Because in any sufficiently busy company, the last thing an engineering team wants to do is upset the apple cart. Right? You don't want excitement or new and shiny. And I think that's, for good reason. You get paged if something goes wrong. So why would you introduce excitement? Excitement is bad in an engineering team at certain scales. So I would build these tools, and my goal with the tools was to improve our security compliance and eliminate some of the upfront cost of getting set up for local development. A few other things that really were big efficiency gains for the team. And I wasn't seeing adoption, so I kind of got into this internal DevRel mode where I would go from team to team, and I would host lunch and learns where I would sort of show them the before and after, and I would teach them about what are the things that are really costly to us as an org that have nothing to do with your job, and wouldn't it be great if you never had to care about any of that because it was just handled for you. And as I did that, I started realizing that the vast majority of the work in engineering beyond the senior level is the communication of it and convincing somebody to give it enough of a chance to see its value. because the best idea doesn't win. The best marketed idea wins. And I know that we all don't like marketing as a general term, but it's true. Like if I am trying to convince you to try something, right now I am currently marketing to you that you should market yourself. I am trying to convince you of its value and why it's worth doing. It's all marketing. It's all sales. But we're doing it for the right reasons. Like I'm not doing it because I want to steal money out of your pocket and put it into mine. I'm doing it because I want your career to be better, right? I want to see the people around me succeed. And so I'm trying to share the knowledge I have, the experience that I have, in a way that hopefully other people can apply and get benefit from. And when I was doing internal code DevRel at IBM, it was the same thing. I didn't have any financial stake in this. Like if I built that software and let it rot in one of the IBM repositories, it wouldn't have mattered because like, who cares? I still got my paycheck every week. But I wanted people to get the benefit. I wanted people to struggle less with our internal code setups. So I would go and teach people how to do this, but I had to market it to them. I had to show them like, here's the world you live in. Here's the world you could live in. Here's how little work it'll take you to get to the better world. Here's all the things that go away if you adopt this new approach. And that was what got people to try it. And that was really a big lesson for me, that it's like 80% communication, because the code won't sell itself, and nobody under stress is going to voluntarily try something that could get them paged at 5 o'clock in the morning. In smaller co's, you invent a job, but they don't have the money that larger companies do. I felt this very directly because when I was at IBM, my job title was not what I did. I sort of went in as one thing, and then I started acting like a different thing. And it became a job. Like they maneuvered to put me into the role that I was providing the most value. But it took a lot of internal campaigning to get me to where I wanted to be. Because I really like being a tech lead, like a front-end tech lead, working on a team of like 2 or 3 on cool projects. That was super fun. But I saw bigger opportunities, and so I had to like internally campaign to get put into the role where I could solve the bigger opportunities, which was cool. But also, like IBM was like, yeah, you can do that work, but we're not paying you more. And they weren't willing to pay me more until I got an offer from another company, at which point they tried to counter. But I do think that's a big risk. Like, and it depends on what you're trying to get, right? Like I wanted the experience, and I wanted the impact that I could have at a big company. And I wanted to learn what it was like to work at that scale, because IBM has 400,000, some ridiculous number of employees. And I wanted to know what it was like to work at that scale. And it turns out it is real slow, but also you can have like really interesting impact doing stuff that at a small company doesn't feel worth it. You know, like some of the little optimizations that I would do, they didn't matter at a 10-person startup, because it's just faster for us to get on a call and like, okay, everybody open up this file, edit this thing, great, you're done. For me to build a code mod doesn't make any sense for 10 people, but for 10,000 people, that's a $1 million savings every time that I can stop a meeting, right? We had a whole team that were like 15 engineers whose entire job was rotating around the IBM cloud code base to different teams and fixing the security stuff as it evolved. Then they were just kind of on this endless loop of like updating things based on the newest specs, because by the time they got around the loop, the specs had updated again. So they'd have to go back and do it again, right? It was, and that sort of work is the stuff that I was trying to automate and complete, because like that team wasn't having fun. They wanted to build stuff. So when we were able to fix a lot of these things, that team got assigned to things they wanted to do instead of just being the cleanup crew, right? So anyways, that sort of stuff is, it's definitely like you can in fact create your own job, but it is very difficult. They should throw bread at you. That's true. If recruiters showed up with bread, I would probably have a lot of different jobs. Yeah. Do assignments to get hired. Can you? I'm not sure if that's a comment or a question, so I'm gonna. If it's a question, please ask it again. Great, but technically stronger. So that sucks, and I'm sorry, but it's also good feedback, because it is an opportunity to increase your public appearance of technical skill. So publishing projects, publishing blog posts, anything that can help you establish more technical authority in public will help you overcome that objection in interviews. Because when they start asking you technical questions, you'll be able to point to artifacts that you've created and say, well, when I was working on this project, I did it like this, or when I wrote this thing, I had to study these two things. And those sorts of conversations start to project that competence that does really overcome any of those objections. All technical problems are people problems in disguise. That's a banger quote. Yeah, 100%. And personal branding and marketing, I think there's a difference between, because I think sometimes when people think about personal branding and personal marketing, that it comes off in a very like Kardashian influencer kind of way, where you like, I'm the product and I have to be the center of attention. And I don't think that's not the only route. If you look at folks in the community who have killer track records of just demonstrating their competence, not all of them are the influencer type. Like I know I am. I'm pretty like out in your face about this stuff. But look at folks like Rachel Andrew, who is a CSS powerhouse, did a ton of work on like CSS Grid, was an editor at CSS Tricks, has done so much for this community. Rachel's not doing anything that I would consider to be influencing. Right? She is very influential, however, because she's doing work. Like she's putting out a great body of work. Jake Archibald is the same. His work on web performance, on the image optimization and stuff with like Squoosh.app and SVG OMG, like that sort of stuff. It establishes this very clear track record of technical skill, and it doesn't ever feel like the quote unquote tech influencer sort of thing. You're not seeing the social media action, but you're seeing the work, the body of work is there. And so I don't think there's more than one way to do this, and it doesn't have to be the way that I've done it. You can put out a body of work that feels true to your way of existing in the world. Like you can do everything. It shouldn't necessarily feel comfortable, but it shouldn't feel disingenuous. Like if you feel like you're putting on a character, that's probably not sustainable. If you're uncomfortable because publishing something makes you feel like, oh, what if people don't like it? That's fine. Publish it anyways. But if you feel like, I don't feel like I'm being myself, that's a little different, right? Like examine that and figure out why. Because if it's, if you're trying to like post a thing every day to, I don't know, keep up your social engagement and you hate it, don't do it. I don't look at my engagement numbers at all because I tried that for a while and it made me absolutely miserable. I hated thinking about engagement. My approach has been to pretend it doesn't exist and do whatever I want and just hope for the best. And honestly, probably not the best strategy when my entire job is effectively being an influencer, but I can be proud of it because I don't ever feel like I'm, engineering something to be for maximum engagement. I'm just kind of doing stuff, and sometimes people like it and sometimes they don't care. What's everybody saying about what's the turkey trot? What's happening? Hi, James, by the way. It's just a small change. That's true. That's true. Oh, I had a raid. Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming in. I'm using StreamYard, and for whatever reason, they don't give me any information about that stuff. Like, I don't hear about raids. I don't hear about subs, any of that stuff. But didn't give him much to... Well, thank you for coming in. What's up, Stony Eagle? But yeah. All right. So now I'm kind of all over the place. What was I had something I wanted to talk about. It was about my friend Nate. And we were talking about, Maybe it'll come back to me. I'm not sure. More guided material on personal branding. Oh, that's a good question. So I don't, I don't know if I can, because I don't know that anything I did would get beyond survivor's bias. Everything I've done has been, I thought something was fun and I shared it with my friends. And as I've gotten a bigger platform, I've had more and more friends to share things with, and I've just sort of kept doing that. It's been very slow. You know, if you look at my public career, I wrote my first article for CSS Tricks in like 2008, maybe 2007. And I got lucky. It was, Chris Coyer gave me a shot, and for whatever reason, the thing that I wrote was popular. It hit the front page of Dig. Really cool moment. And that led to a book deal. So I'd written, I was writing articles. I was like speaking at local meetups and stuff. And it was just honestly, I was in Montana. I had very little opportunity to talk about anything I was interested with people, because most of the people around me they weren't interested. They didn't care. So I would speak at a local meetup, because it was a handful of people who like, we weren't all even the same kind of programmers. It was just Montana programmers, because we didn't have enough programmers for specialized meetups. And so I would go talk about whatever I was working on, and they would talk about what they were working on. And usually we didn't really understand what each of us was doing, because they'd be talking about Ruby and I'd be talking about PHP and somebody else would be talking about Java. But it was cool to see that other people were doing the thing that I was doing, and writing the articles was the same thing. I wrote it because I was interested and it was fun. And I used to be in a band, so there's a part of me that really loves performance. And so I like this idea of like interaction and being up in front of a crowd. Like, it's fun for me. I really enjoy it. So I was looking for ways to do that a little bit. And I learned that if I was on stage, it was something I could point to on my resume and say, this is why you should hire me. And as an agency runner, those little credentials are big. They help a lot. So I just kind of push on that stuff, and it was slow, but I kind of steadily grew over the course of years and years and years. And I put up my first YouTube video in 2015, I think. My first real YouTube video that wasn't like a video of like ice cream in Thailand or something. And I just kept kind of steadily doing stuff as I was interested in it. And around 2018, 2019, I realized that I had something going on YouTube that was different than anything I'd done before. And I was like, oh, this is kind of fun. I'm going to keep doing this. But there's never been a strategy. Like, I've never sat down and thought, like, what is my personal brand? Honestly, if you go back a few weeks in the stream archive, you'll see me have a full mental breakdown about this, because I was in existential crisis mode, because I don't know what my value prop is. I don't know why people watch me. I have a better idea now, because I asked and people told me, but at the time I was like, I don't know why I'm here. Like, I'm here because I'm having fun, and I hope that you're having fun, and I want to share fun stuff with my friends, but I don't have like a thing to sell. I don't have there's no e-book or something. And I don't know that I could even write down anything other than like, be yourself for a long time. And that's going to work, because that's what I did. Yeah. Finding the narrative arc is super hard. Like, especially because okay, this is going to be a rabbit hole. So, I'm just going to lean in. So I think one of the things that I've thought about a lot is why I struggle so hard with the concept of like labels and niches and stuff like that. I struggle with it so hard that I have this like immediate recoil if I start to get grouped in with like a labeled group. No matter what it is. Like, if I was going to like regular exercise classes and somebody started calling me a CrossFitter, I'd be like, no, I'm not a CrossFitter. Like, even if I was going to CrossFit 3 days a week, no, I'm not a CrossFitter. When I don't think I would call myself a like dev influencer, even though I'm clearly a dev influencer. I don't think I would even call myself a DevRel, really, because that's part of what I do, but it's not who I am. And I've always been really uncomfortable with this idea of of taking a person and reducing them to a label, because it eliminates, it makes them two-dimensional. Like if I say a number of jobs, we all have this picture in our heads of like what that person is like, and it won't be the same. Like, there are some that are really contentious. Like if I say cop, some of us just thought one type of person, some of us just thought another type of person, and the actual person in question who has that label didn't have a lot of say in what we just decided that person is like. And that's true about a lot of things. And so I think, the same thing is true when I think about being called an influencer, is that to some people that is a really derogatory term, and to some people that is like the dream job, and to other people it has some indication of this thing or that thing, and all of that is not really anything to do with me. But if I called myself an influencer, then people would apply all those qualities to me whether or not they'd ever spoken to me, right? And that makes it really difficult to buy into a label like that, because it creates this sense of like I'm outsourcing my identity to somebody else. And so when you start trying to, get down to a, what's my core value prop or narrative arc or whatever the thing is, then I feel it becomes the same thing. I'm trying to take a whole person, me, and I'm trying to reduce myself to a sentence or two. And I get to choose that sentence, so it's better to me than an externally applied label, but it's still, it reduces a lot. And you try to make a comment like, oh, you're funny in your bio, you make a joke, and then that says one thing, versus if you try to rely on your credentials, that says another thing. If you try to, like, whatever it is, right? And so you're putting up a signpost that says, people who like this sentence that I wrote, you're gonna like me. And it feels like closing a lot of doors, which is very hard. And it's really, really difficult for me to settle on a thing, because like, ultimately what I want, what I want to be and what I want to do is just sort of a person who does stuff because it's interesting, and when it stops being interesting, I'll stop, and I hope a lot of people come along for the ride, and when it's useful to them, they'll watch, and when it's not, they won't, and that's okay, right? I don't think that is that's definitely not a growth. That's not a growth mindset. Or I guess it's a different kind of growth mindset. Like, it's growth in the sense that I am leaving a lot of doors open, and I sort of have unbounded growth. I can go wherever I want without feeling like I'm in violation of my identity. But it is also not growth-minded in the sense that people tend to want to find people like them. And if I refuse to say what I'm like, why would anybody want to hang out with me? If I'm like, oh, I'm an enigma, I'm a mystery, I contain multitudes, I'm too big for words. I don't know. Like so ultimately my only approach so far has been, I hope people give me enough of a chance to see what I'm like, because I don't know how to say what I'm like. Which again, I don't think works out well for growth, because I'm not making a strong case to give me a shot in the first place. But I don't know. I mean, these are the things that I struggle with. What do I do for a living? Yeah, this is good. I like this. What do I do for a living? I live, of course. I love that. I mean, and that's very true. Like, that's sort of the vibe. I think a lot about the people that I admire, and the folks whose paths I like the most are the ones who had no path. They just sort of did what was interesting, and it had a very you could call them a polymath, but ultimately it wasn't necessarily about being a polymath so much as it was just about trying to find things that were fun, like a life spent having fun, which is the best. To me, that's the best outcome. And I think to say I'm a web dev teacher is accurate, but it cuts off some of the other things that I do. And to say I'm a bread enthusiast is true. Also cuts off a lot of nuance about who I am. And any of those claims, like I'm a video producer, all right, but then all right, I'm a dev focused video producer. I don't know. I kind of also want to make food content. So any of these things is sort of, it's like me. It feels like by saying it, I'm closing doors, and so I haven't really resolved this for myself, and so I won't give advice on how to resolve it for anybody else. And again, this is sort of what points to me not having a good answer for like how do you build a personal brand. Because I don't think I'm doing it right from a business standpoint. Like if I was giving somebody advice on how to start a business, I would say find a niche and serve that niche. I have done neither of those things. I am, unless the niche is me and I am serving myself, and I hope that people want to come along for the ride. So what I'm trying to embrace is, philosophy break. I'm trying to embrace that life is long and it doesn't need to be a straight path, and you get to start over as many times as you want within the time you have. So if I choose a niche today, that doesn't mean I can't change later, right? But I do have to choose, and that's the part that's hard. So I think a lot, I'm trying to think less of life as a book, because I think that we tend to think of it as like it's a book. You've got the beginning of the story, the middle of the story, and the end of the story. But I've been thinking of it more and more as a series, a collection, where it's like the Sherlock Holmes stories. It's a series of books, and they're all about Sherlock Holmes, but there are multiple stories where there's a beginning, a middle, and an end. And I don't think that Sherlock Holmes had a huge growth arc as a character, but in more modern series, you see that a lot. Like the Expanse, for example, is 7 books, 8 books, and the main character starts out in one place, and we follow that character through great stories. But in each book, that character's kind of a different person. Like they grow and they change based on what they go through in the story, until at the end they're still ultimately the same person. Like their values hold steady, but their approach to things, the things they're focused on, what they're working toward, shifts throughout the course of the book. Or throughout the course of the series, and each book is sort of them striving toward a different thing. So if you only read one book, you'd have a different picture of this character than if you read the entire series. And when I think about stuff like, what I would want to do, I'm thinking about folks like, Tina Fey has this really interesting trajectory of like, she writes, she's a comedian, she's an actor, she does everything, right? And Pharrell Williams has clothing and music and production and performance and like all sorts of stuff, and it's all like kind of for any one of these people, it's sort of like thematically linked through their experiences and stuff. But it's not, you wouldn't say that like Pharrell is a composer or a fashion designer, but both of those things are true. Pharrell is something else. Pharrell is just Pharrell. And that to me is sort of the ultimate goal, is that you get to be as many things as you want to be, and you can focus on those things at the time that it makes sense to focus on those things, but none of them is the whole story. It's just a book in the series. And if I think about it like that, it makes it less, I don't know. Because the flip side of all this, with me refusing labels and being unwilling to narrow down my focus, is that because I'm not narrowing down my focus, it's hard for me to do anything that really drives big changes. And what I mean by that is I can actually, there's this illustration that I love, that I can't remember who made it. If somebody recognizes this and can remind me, tell me. But if you've got this much, like you've got progress basically, right? So if you are, everything is important, or, oops, whoa, what just happened? Here, one thing is important, On this side, you end up with kind of this like, you get a little bit of distance in a lot of directions. And, it's fine. This is all progress. Everything is progress. And you're making moves and things are happening. But the challenge is that you're always feeling like you're not getting that far. Because you're focused in every direction at once. And so all of the progress is progress, but it doesn't necessarily feel like you're making a huge dent in your to-do list. Whereas if you pick one thing and you focus just on that thing, you can really make a huge amount of progress in a very short amount of time, right? And to me, that's the trade-off that I'm making by not choosing a focus. Is I'm choosing this. And so I make slow progress on a lot of things. And I think that's okay. Like, that's a choice I can make. But if I were to say all of this stuff will still be here tomorrow, I'm going to focus on this one, then suddenly this becomes possible and I could do this really fast. It's just a matter of deciding which, is one of these things important enough to me to make that trade-off. Yeah, the 10,000 hour expert versus a generalist, like which of these things is important today, right? And so the one way that I could look at this is like, maybe over the course of a life, I end up with this and I've made this much progress on all of these things. An alternative is that maybe I have a sequence where I end up over the course of my life doing this. And I pick areas and I focus each time on one of these and I just go one to the next to the next. And I don't know what's better. Like, I think, I could argue for, efficiencies, and I talk about monotasking and a lot of reasons why it's good to focus on one thing. But then there's the other part of me that's just like, I like to play. And one of the things that I think is really valuable about play is keeping it undirected. And so if I'm looking at something that is interesting today, it might not be interesting in a couple weeks. But if I play with it today, I'm going to learn something. I'm going to take something home. So the lack of direction can be a strength. And I think maybe the other way to look at it is that maybe the real secret is embracing a bit of both. Like, maybe if we look at a timeline, it's a little bit of this and a little bit of this and then maybe back to this. And you can sort of, when something emerges as the thing that you want to do, it becomes the thing you focus on. And I guess an emergent example of this would be what I'm doing with my career right now. I made the shift a year ago to this like dev TV idea that I have that I want to make real. And that has gotten a huge amount of my attention. Like, I would say to the point that I'm closer to this right now with what I'm doing with Learn with Jason than I am to this. I still don't know that I could like niche down entirely if I had to write a bio, but I could probably get closer to this. And it's something that I feel like I can talk about and defend because it's important to me. It's something that I want to get done. But I imagine there are some milestones that I want to hit, and once I've hit those, I'm probably back over toward this a little bit more because there are a bunch of things that I'm ignoring right now that I want to do, but they're not like the top of my list. I don't know. Hold on, I think I need to head into the YouTube moderation stuff for a second because it looks like we got some spam. Yep, I'm just gonna go ahead and time all that out. Good. All right. So, anyways, just put that right on screen, didn't I? Okay, never mind. Ignore all of that. Both is good. Yeah. Yes. I think that's what I haven't figured out, and I think the unique challenge for each of us is deciding when is the right time? Like when does it make sense to focus versus when should you be unfocused? I think that there's actually like a huge value in being undirected. There's a book called Bored and Brilliant that I think is, I mean, if I'm being a little cruel, I would say that it's one of those books that's kind of, it could have been a blog post, but it is good. And so I will link to it. And the general idea here is, it's, I don't know. The point that it's making is, boredom is like a key part of our growth and creative processes. And I have a very concrete example of this. I actually have several concrete examples of this. When I was working at my agency, I got locked into this very tight loop of I had a million things to do. I didn't have enough time to do all of it. I was really stressed out about that. And I felt like my only option was to I dug a hole and the only option was to dig through to the other side, right? Like that was it. You just have to keep going because there's no other way out. And my creative everything just tanked. I wasn't writing. I wasn't really designing anything anymore. I wasn't building stuff for myself. I was just sort of, I was in like grind mode. I was like, I got to get this done. And you know, the problem with projects like that is that when you get into that grind mode, you aren't slowing down to figure out which projects are the right ones. You're just trying to get to the paycheck because, you know, bills are due. And so I had this never ending conveyor belt of like project in, grind on it, ship the project, next one, go on, so on and so forth. And I burned out just horribly hard. And when I left, I took some time to be completely disconnected, and then I intentionally took a contract that I knew would only be a few hours a week. And I was living in Thailand, so I didn't need to make very much money to stay very comfortable. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna intentionally work way less than 40 hours a week. And what I found was that like for the first couple of months, I couldn't even think. Like I was so burned out, I was so stressed out that I couldn't my brain wouldn't fire up. I was just sort of in this like permanent, you know, the possum meme of just like it was that, you know, and I couldn't unlock. So that first couple of months was I like watched TV. I tried to read and couldn't really focus. I didn't do much of anything. I slept a lot. And then I started to unwind. I could feel my, you know, like my shoulders relaxed, and I was able to think a little bit. And I started having the urge to like do creative stuff, to build something, to read again. And as that started happening, and again, hugely privileged that I was able to do this, but I just took another couple months. I was like, all right, what's going to happen if I just stay bored? And as I did that, you know, things started to emerge, like ideas would come, and I wrote a couple things that I was really proud of. I was able to put out this product. It's gone now, but it was called Refocus. It was like this like finding the stuff that's important to you, because that was the work that I'd been doing. And it was just like a series of worksheets, like stuff that I had done on my own or that mentors had taught me to help me sort of go through some thought processes to get to something that would make me happier, right? And so I worked on that, and I just, you know, I started like thinking about business ideas, and I was like, oh, all right, I've got creative drive back, right? But I didn't immediately jump into one of those business ideas. I was like, no, I'm gonna chill. Like I'm gonna take this full year, because this contract is a full year, and I'm gonna do just the contract. Like I'm not starting any businesses. I'm not doing anything new. Let's roll. So I stayed bored, and about 2/3 of the way through, I had this huge existential crisis about what's my place in the world and like what value do I provide, and like, if I can just sit here and coast on this contract and like nobody notices or cares, am I doing anything worthwhile? Like what actually matters? What's important? And that was the beginning of a lot of what I talk about today with, finding careers that are not like careers that actually serve a purpose, not just that pay the bills, but that like make us feel like we spend our time in a good way, right? And I think about that a lot. And this existential crisis, it was only possible for me to get into this self-reflection because I was bored, because I wasn't filling every minute of my day with some kind of distraction or work or to-do item or whatever. The room to like think and let my mind start to process things at a meta level, not just at a response level. It let me, put stuff into my subconscious and really start chewing on it in a meaningful way. It was hugely beneficial for me, and something that I think I wish was easier for everybody to do, because I know it's so hard to take those types of breaks because everything's expensive. But then as a second example of this, my wife, Marissa, just took a year off. She was working at Netlify. She was, heading up research there and doing a lot of UX design, and just kind of hit this wall where like she was starting to burn out, and we could sense it was happening. So I just told her, I was like, look, you don't need to work. Like we're in a very fortunate position. We don't have kids. We don't have any big debts. Like just do it. Like take the time and figure out what actually makes you happy, because theoretically you would never need to work again if you don't want to. So she took the time, and in that time she spent a couple of months, same way I did, being a potato. She watched a lot of shows, she read some books, just kind of like chilled out, didn't do much of anything, and then she got bored. Like first she was recovering, and then she got bored, and as she got bored, she started finding all these things she was interested in. She started getting heavy into her ceramics. She joined the board of a local park. She started getting really involved with local politics around like climate policy and stuff. And we figured out this is what moves her. This is her why. So because she took that time, she's now I think right at a year of since she left, and she's got this super clear picture of what she wants to do, and she's starting to apply for jobs again to be a designer on climate conscious things. She specifically, she's looking at like geospatial data and maps, because that seems to be what actually moves the world, is our the way we visualize it. So she's got this really clear path forward that came from her ability to take that time and be bored. But had she stayed distracted or found a way to, like, oh, I got to be busy all the time so I don't have to think, it's that thinking, and there was like a crisis minute in the middle where, she was like, well, I just feel like I'm not doing anything that matters, and all this stuff is stupid, and none of it's ever going to make money, and like, how am I ever going to make a living doing something that I care about? And we had to work through all that. She goes to therapy. We had a lot of conversations with me, with good friends, and just trying to figure out what was the right fit. And she ultimately landed on something that she's going to make a good living doing, and that she feels is actually going to make a difference. And so she's out there doing the networking work now to try to land one of those jobs. And so I think that boredom is really important. I think that creating spaces to be disconnected and sort of out of it that's a really big deal. Data science and design is kind of exactly what she wants to do. I think, honestly, if she could do anything in the world, I think what she would do is design they put up in national parks that have like drawings of a bird and then stories about what that bird's habitat and like migration patterns are like. She loves that stuff, but that doesn't pay very much. So, so she's looking at other options. But yeah, I mean, I think this is sort of the problem, is it's very, very difficult to get yourself into a position where you have the luxury of just being bored. And so one of the things that I've been thinking more and more about is, can I create room for being bored inside of my job? Like, I can't take another year off. I mean, I suppose I could find a way to make it work if I really, really wanted to, but it would be very hard. and it would stress everything in my life out, because I've got these good communities here. I've got, good clients. I've got good momentum going with my business. So to take a year off would really, it would upset the apple cart in a way that I don't think I'm willing to do again. Like, I did it the first time because I felt like I was going to die if I didn't. I was so stressed out that my beard was falling out in clumps. Like, it was a pretty clear signal that something needed to change. But now I don't think I have that. I don't have the threat. There's not an existential threat that merits something drastic. So instead, I've got to figure out how to integrate this into my life in a way that doesn't feel like I'm burning it all down to create some space. I think there needs to be a way to create space inside of things as they are. And so last year, one of the things we did that I loved, that I really wanted to do again this year, but unfortunately dates didn't work out, is we met up with some friends in Finland, and we stayed in a cabin for a week. And like, we had our cell phones and our computers and stuff like that, but like, we didn't really use them. We hung out, we cooked, we went in the sauna, we swam in the lake, and we just like sort of just pretended that the world didn't exist outside of that little parcel of land for a week or so. And boy, was that great. And I came back with so much energy and so many ideas because I was just having these good conversations with people. And that sort of thing is what the inspiration for like the series Web Lunch that I'm working on, which is, let's see, I can find a link to it somewhere. Maybe I can find a link to it somewhere. Here, this one. This is wait, I don't think that link is public, so let me get this link instead. Here. This series that I did is, I think you might have seen this one. This was a series I did where the premise was basically like, go get people that I know think like this, that they're having these types of conversations, and try to create the space for us to have those conversations. So when Adam was in town, we went to lunch and we had this really wonderful conversation that was about this kind of stuff. How do you build a career that you can be proud of? How do you make sure that you're not just like looking for the next high score in terms of salary, but rather that you're looking at what that salary unlocks and what it means for you? And that's what I want this series to be. So this is work, like it's work, we're doing work, but it's also not, right? Like this is what I want to do anyways. Like if I could do anything in the world, I would be getting people like Adam and some of the other folks I've reached out to be on this series. I would be getting them to come hang out at my house, and we would just have these conversations over a coffee or a beverage of some sort. That's what I would do in my free time. So being able to make this something that I can share and have these conversations in a place where, for anybody who doesn't have access to these types of conversations, maybe they can at least listen in and have some of these thoughts on their own, or maybe it sparks a conversation with their friends. That's what I want to do. Like, this feels like the important work. And the other stuff that I do, like the 4 web devs and the educational content, I'm not going to stop doing that. It's fun. It pays the bills. It's I think helping somebody build a set of skills, that's the sort of stuff that makes a big difference. So I don't want any of that to end, but I want to make sure that we include this as well. I can't get us. This is good. I kept getting Adam's eyes closed whenever I would pause this. So yeah, I think that's the sort of stuff that I think about a lot is how do we make that work? This is a good thought. Like, I don't know how you structure this in a company. Like, so when I was at Netlify, this was a pretty constant struggle for us because we always wanted to create those like hallway track conversations, and we'd think about this a lot. Like there were really good conversations that happened when we would have like a team offsite. People show up and they're hanging out in the hotel bar, and they have, like, after all the meetings, they're hanging out in the hotel bar and they have this killer conversation that leads to a really good insight that turns into like our next big initiative, because the unstructuredness allowed us to not be like trying to get through an agenda, but rather to look at all the disparate parts of the business for their strengths and weaknesses and potential synergies. Oh, I just said synergies unironically. Oh my God. Oh, just a moment of silence for my personality. Anyways, oh my God. So you have these conversations. You can look at something with no pressure, and you can just sort of get into the details in an unstructured way. But how do you do that remotely, right? And I think remote work is the right way to work. But this is the one casualty of it, I think, is when I've worked in offices, some of the most productive time I spent in that office was when I would pull people from different teams together and we'd go to lunch. And at those lunches, they'd be talking about, what they're working on, and then something would come up that's like, oh, this is super frustrating. And then the other team would say, wait, oh, we dealt with that and we solved it like this. And it turns into this whole conversation where suddenly these teams are collaborating. And that never could have happened with a meeting, because they didn't know that there was an overlap there. Like, you have to have that spontaneous discovery. I've tried this a few different ways. Like I had the luxury of being a VP, so I could kind of do whatever I wanted. And so I would try to set up meetings where we just sort of left the first 10 minutes to be chaos. And if the meeting turned into some really beneficial discussion, I would just move the agenda to async and say, these are the questions we got to answer. That was, I would say, medium successful, because it led to really good conversations, but it also led to a lot of people feeling like our meetings were completely chaotic and unstructured, which, nobody wants to be on the hook for an unspecified number of chaotic meetings at any given point. We tried like scheduling unstructured time. That didn't work very well, because it was sort of like, welcome to the meeting. Let's set a timer for 5 minutes. Now everybody socialize. That doesn't work. But yeah, it was very, I don't know. The only thing that I landed on was remote teams that had semi-regular get-togethers, but I know that people hate that. Like, I hate that. I hated that the leadership team would meet every month. And I was like, why are we in person? And then I'd get there and I'd realize why. Because when we were, we would stay at a hotel to meet, because we were all spread all over the country. And in the hotel bar after the meetings was when we'd actually get a lot of the work done, because we'd start having these sort of unstructured chats about what the business should be doing. And no matter what we did, we could not seem to get that to translate into video. So I don't know what a video call equivalent of the hotel bar chat is, but I think whoever can crack that in a meaningful, reproducible way that'll be what finally makes remote work like permanent forever, the end. Because that's the one major gap that I feel with remote work right now, is that I don't have a way to. I mean, it's one of the reasons why I'm trying to move. Like, even Learn with Jason, I'm trying to negotiate with sponsors to include travel so that I can bring guests here more often than not, because like it's just more fun. Like it's more fun. You get more out of those conversations when people are in the same room. So, I don't know. I'm like the biggest remote work proponent in the world, and I'm still so on board with like in-person meetups. And I think that there's something that is as yet irreplaceable about that kind of conversation. I think you're right. I think this is like, having very limited insight into actual Japanese culture outside of the little bit of time that I got to spend in Tokyo, which was super fun. But we went to a couple of like the salaryman bars, and it did seem like there was this just sort of implicit understanding that you would kind of let loose in these bars. because you had to go button it up at work the next day. And I know that like one of the stories I've heard, and somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, is that like if you're doing a business deal in, I think, China, part of the business deal is you go out with the person that you're doing a deal with, and you're supposed to just get absolutely wrecked together, because it's a way of like allowing you to be a little more real with each other, and it leads to a bit more trust and connection. I don't know. I think like I don't know if like must get drunk to do business is necessarily the right approach to that, but I like the spirit of it. Like I like the general approach of, you want to have that sense of camaraderie and trust, and for teams to build that, they have to spend time that's not corporately mandated, or if it's corporately mandated, it at least needs to not have an agenda and like activities that aren't, discuss these work items, please. Candid, vulnerable, I like this. Candid, vulnerable intuition is innovation. I like that. I like that a lot. Let's see, 2 years being remote took a toll on my mental health and a sense of responsibility. Yeah, I think, and I think everybody falls somewhere different on this scale, right? Like I know that for me, I want a hybrid working situation where I go into the office during planning sessions and like a day a week to meet everybody for lunch otherwise. And then I would be remote the rest of the time, because I think like I am a huge fan of like the whiteboard planning session, and you can sort of recreate this in something like Miro or whatever, but I don't know, there's an energy when everybody's crowded around a whiteboard putting sticky notes up together. Like that's something that I think leads to the plans feel more co-owned when they get created like that. I find that when you're doing stuff on Zoom, the delay of a video call necessitates structure that doesn't necessarily need to exist in person. And that's not to say that I think in person should be a free-for-all, but you can do things like raise a hand in person, and it's not as structured as like there is a Zoom chair who requires everyone to click this button, and then the Zoom chair will recognize this person to speak and unmute their microphone, at which point they can speak, and then their microphone will be remuted and the next person, you know what I mean? Like there's so much ceremony around running an organized meeting, whereas in person you can, like, if everybody's respectful, if somebody puts their hand up, and you all just kind of turn to them, and then they speak, and then the next person says, yeah, and then you kind of turn to them, right? It sort of works, right? Like we have so much experience of how to conduct respectful conversation in person that we don't have to rely on these really complicated structures of like the Zoom captain whose job it is to keep everybody from talking over each other on a video call. Yeah, I don't know. It's really, but I also think like I don't get any work done in an office, like from a coding standpoint. Like I will sit down at my desk, I will pull out my computer, I'll open it, I'll look at some code, and then I'll turn around and I'll go, what are you working on? And then I'm just like chatting with my coworkers, right? Like I think that interaction is extremely valuable, but again, it should be like once a week. And the other thing too is like, I think the huge value of remote is that you get to work with anybody anywhere in the world. And as soon as you introduce hybrid, you're basically saying, well, you can work from any part of this city, which is also good. Like, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. Like in all honesty, if I were to start hiring full-time Learn with Jason employees, I might do that actually, because being able to be in the same space sometimes without having to make it a whole thing where you've got to travel for 3 days to get here. I don't know. There's something about that. Like there's something really nice about this idea that you could, when necessary or when it's fun, just get the team together, and it's not like a giant corporate expense or a huge, like, people got to leave their family for a night kind of thing. You just like, all right, I'm going into town today. I'll be back tonight, right? Most of the time you're remote, and sometimes you're not. I really, really like that. And I don't know. I guess maybe that makes me a traitor to the remote cause, but like, I think each company runs differently, right? Like, I don't know. And I think you got to find one that vibes with the way that you want to work. Am I reading from your brain again today? Or remind them to unmute. Yeah, I think there's a lot to it. And there are a lot of reasons why, like I don't know. I wouldn't be able to put together the company of my dreams in Portland because most of the people that I want to work with, like if I were to ever start a software company, I have a list of people I'm going after immediately, and none of them live here. Well, very few of them live here. So it would be, like I'm probably not going to convince most of the people that I would love to work with to up and move to Portland. And I don't necessarily want to up and move somewhere else because I kind of like it here, right? So I don't know. I don't know what'll actually happen if I ever start building a company. I just know that in a dream scenario, all my friends would magically live by me and they would have lived here for a long time so they didn't feel like they were being relocated. And we would all just be one big happy family that hung out together. Yeah, move to Chicago or else. Exactly. Like I would, I don't know, like if I could live in Chicago, because I've got so many good friends there, I would. But I like it here too, and I have so many good friends here. And I think this is sort of the blessing and curse of remote work, is that you start to have this more and more distributed friend group, and there's really no world where like your community is with you. Your community is everywhere, because that's how we distributed it, I guess. But I don't know. I think the challenge is definitely like trying to find ways to do this that are more I don't think there's a one size fits all. I think every company is going to have to design their own best case based on the people that are there and how everybody works. And unfortunately, that stuff is really hard. And we don't hire like organizational designers or, the people that would actually make that stuff run. We're usually like, I don't know, we can't really afford that kind of expense right now. So the culture becomes emergent at companies instead of intentional. And emergent behavior can be good because a functional, healthy group will kind of naturally tend toward good practices. But it won't scale very well because it's all built on implied behavior and sort of implicit understandings of things, as opposed to like we want the company to grow like this. And I don't know, maybe the answer isn't that you need process. Maybe the answer is that you need to intentionally not grow. Who knows? It's very, very complicated. Would I winter in Chicago? Absolutely not. No, I have done winter in Montana where it's not windy, and I've been in the wind in Chicago, and those two things combined, no, thank you. Yeah, the irony of not hiring those people that make systems run. I agree. 70 degrees all winter? Oh no. Well, then it's going to shift to not wanting this summer in Chicago. Oh no. How do I do time management? I kind of, let's see. I'm not going to say I don't, because I very clearly do. I don't do well with like hard structure. So I've tried in the past where I would get really rigid about my calendar, and I would say, from 7 to 8 is shower and breakfast, and 8 to 9 is get coffee and go to the office, and 9 to 11 is focus work. And, I would have these big blocks that I would try to get to. And then I would constantly feel like I was in trouble. I have issues with authority, even if that authority is my own. So if anybody tells me what to do and like where to do it and when to do it, I have this immediate knee-jerk reaction to be like, you're not my real dad. So that tends to backfire if I try to really heavily structure my time. So instead, what I try to do is I try to work on the concept of one thing at a time, but not necessarily one thing per day. So when I write my list, because I write down my to-do list every day or two, like it kind of depends on how much I did the day before. If I check off one thing on my list, I'm probably not going to rewrite it. But when I rewrite my list, I'm thinking about like, what's the thing that has to be done first? And then I focus on that thing. And if I have lots of things that need to be done, I'll start looking at like, when are they due, and like what's the downside of me not doing this? Because like if I miss a deadline, like I said I was going to publish a blog post by this date, that the risk of me not publishing that is that I feel bad because I said I was going to do something and I didn't. If I have a client that I'm working with and I told them I would deliver something by Friday, the consequence of that is that I could burn the relationship with that client and not have, damage my reputation and then not get business in the future. So if both things are due, I'm going to stack rank the one that has higher, that is more consequential to me. And then I also, the other thing is I try to be realistic about my time estimates, and not necessarily time box, I'm going to do this in 2 hours, but I have done a thing like this in about 2 hours. I shouldn't let this take my whole day. And that helps sort of. Sometimes I'll still make it take the whole day. But knowing what the most important thing is, and knowing roughly how long it should take me, so that I'm not just scrolling Twitter and saying this is the only thing I got to do today. I'll just get to it when I get to it. On days when I'm well behaved, that works and I get a lot done. On days when I'm poorly behaved, I blow all my time on Twitter, and then I get to the end of the night and I go, crap, I didn't do that one thing. And so then I stay up late and Marissa yells at me and I feel bad. So yeah, I think that those are my time management is it. I think it sounds chaotic when I talk about it like that, but it feels fairly structured to me. It's just sort of everything is in a stack. There can only be one thing on top of the stack, and you just pull the next thing off the stack and have a general sense of how much time is left to complete a task. And then the other thing that's really important to me is recognizing that I could pretend that I have more, but I probably have 4.5 productive hours in me in a given day. And when I say 4.5 productive hours, I mean working. If I sit down to write code, not counting the time that I, wander around the house looking for snacks, that I walk over to the coffee shop, that I, complain at Marissa that I have to do this work, but the actual coding time, 4.5 hours is about where my brain turns to mush. So if I know that I'm doing a task that's going to take me about 4 hours, I just don't do anything else that day. I know that that'll be the thing that I do, and then I'm going to be cooked. And that's all right, because if I take the time to recover, then the next day when I come back, I'm fresh, instead of feeling I just did the one big thing and then I ground on these other things that I wasn't making progress on because I was kind of mush by that point. And so you go into the next day guilty as opposed to energized, right? So being realistic about how many hours you can actually work, and then giving yourself permission to not work when you've hit that limit, I think is really, really good. And my caveat to that is there are things that I can do after I've hit my work limit. If I do really heavy video editing, really heavy writing or coding for 4.5 hours, I probably can't switch to another video editing or coding task and be productive. But I can respond to a lot of emails. I can pay bills. I can, send invoices or stuff like that, right? I can still get work done. So it's not like I just say, all right, one task and I'm out for the day. I'm going to go lay on the floor and see if I can throw Cheetos into my mouth. Sometimes I do, but usually I'll say, all right, so what are some admin tasks that have been piling up? And I'll have, 3 or 4 emails that I didn't respond to yesterday that I should really respond to today. So I'll knock those out, and then I'll just go do whatever I want, have a nice relaxing evening, watch some TV, cook dinner, whatever it is. And I don't have to feel guilty because I know I did as much as I was really probably capable of doing that day without just turning it into a slog. Priority has no plural form. That is also very fun. If I'm sitting at my work computer looking at Twitter, not usually. So this is one of the side effects of being a creator online, is that sometimes it's my job. Sometimes what I'm doing is actively trying to promote something and be out there engaging and doing all the things. And so sometimes that's what I set out to do for that day. Is today's a launch day. I'm going to be all over all the social media, doing all the social media stuff. Most days it's what I do to distract myself. And so I wouldn't really, that's more my break time, So I try not to give myself an out of I did social media building today, so I can not do the rest of this task. But ultimately it's also, I have to be, accountable to myself, because I don't have a boss. If I don't turn things in, I'm done. So, I have to be realistic about what I what I have to deliver. And if I start lying to myself and saying like, I can do that tomorrow, eventually I get to, Friday or the following week and I'm like, shit, I have 6 things that I have to do today that I kept putting off. And now I'm going to have a real long day and I'm going to be miserable all week because I just blew all of my executive function, all of my sleep schedule, everything else. So, there's also just this constant question that I'm asking myself, which is like, did I do as much as I could have today? And not could have in like the theoretical, there are so many seconds in a day, but in the, like, how much gas did I have? Did I actually use that gas? Or did I just like click around Twitter because I didn't want to start this thing that's kind of intimidating to me? And if I gave it as much energy as I had that day, then I try not to beat myself up over it. If I leave the end of the day and I feel like I didn't really put any constructive energy into something meaningful, that's a good sign that like tomorrow I should probably really get into it. Unless it was a day that I scheduled off, like I don't really work on the weekends. I don't work nights. And like, 40 hours a week is not like a 9 to 5 for me. It's like a whenever the productivity is the right time. So sometimes I'll, work from 10 to noon and then I'll take a 2-hour lunch break and then I'll go meet somebody for a drink at 3 and then I'll come back and I'll like actually work from 7 to 9. I don't consider that to be working late. I would just say I'd rearrange my day to accommodate the work and the social stuff that I wanted to do. But I very rarely work from like 9 to 9. That is, I know that by probably 2:30 I'm cooked anyways. So like I'm not going to get anything meaningful done between 2:30 and 9. I'm just going to be like at my computer guilt tripping myself about not getting more done. Yeah, but how much do I put off to a virtual assistant? So my system with virtual assistants is, so I work with Aiden. Aiden is, actually, Aiden Cassidy. You recommended him to me. So I've been working with Aiden now for a couple years, I think, at least a year. And Aiden handles everything that I do exactly the same every time. So my metric for like what I hand off is if I do it and it's a checklist and I never deviate from that checklist, it's something that I can and should hand off. So an example would be like when I book an episode of Learn with Jason, there's a list of questions that I have to ask the guests. There are calendar invites that need to get sent. There's a StreamYard thing that needs to get sent. There are coordination with the captioners. Something needs to get created in Sanity. Events need to get created on YouTube and Twitter and LinkedIn and the other one that I use, Twitch. And like all of those things are exactly the same every time. So I have a checklist and Aiden and I worked on that checklist to make sure that it was, clear and we understood exactly what each thing was. And now like that is automated. But stuff that's not the same every time, I don't try to delegate because it's not like I don't have a clear enough understanding of what it's going to be able to delegate it. So it's more like I'm saying, hey, you do this while I watch. So I've kind of looked at like, is it actually repetitive or is it just boring? Because repetitive work, I think, is a great candidate for outsourcing. Boring work is maybe a candidate to look for ways to make it into repetitive stuff that you could delegate. But a lot of the boring stuff I do is like, I'll give you some good examples. I write a lot of proposals and those proposals are almost the same, but everyone is lightly edited to be, like I'm shaping it to what the company's specific needs are, who their audience is. So I'm doing little rewrites and little adjustments and like prices change and all that stuff. Now, theoretically, I could train somebody to write those proposals for me, but I would probably still need to have a meeting with that person for every proposal to do context transfer of like what I'm thinking and how it affects the proposal and how we need to edit this section or that section, or like if we need to modify the contract because of some way that they're set up. Any of those things is the sort of thing that I don't know how I would delegate so much as like supervise somebody doing. So that's sort of my heuristic is like if somebody else did this according to this checklist, would I need to check anything? And if the answer is no, then it's a great candidate for delegation. Virtual assistant is the VA that we're talking about. Not doing your own social media while you're on the clock might be, that is discipline that I do not have. What is that? Oh, apparently when I've put my phone in my pocket today, that little switch that makes it stop making noise switched the other way and my phone was making noise. I've never heard that sound before. Like hiring a grant writer. Yeah, I mean, and they're also like, there are things that I delegate because I can't do them. Like I delegate my editing for my videos because I'm so slow at it that if I'm trying to do it myself, it ultimately will take me 3 times longer than if, so that's actually a good caveat. If it's something that's very repetitive that I can, like it's a checklist and anybody can do it by basically it's like, if you follow these instructions, you will get success and there's not really any variance. Or if it's a skill that's outside of my wheelhouse and I also don't know what I'm doing, then hiring an expert is a better use of my time. Because if me fumbling through DaVinci Resolve doesn't get me a better result, it just takes me 3 times longer for something that's half as good as a professional editor. Like I work with Jeff, Phase One, and Chris from Lemon Productions, and like those two are excellent editors. And I can kind of do what they do, but it'll take me much longer and it won't be as good as what they do. So that's another place where I delegate that, but that's not a VA thing. That's like a contractor, I guess. But anyways, y'all, I thought I was going to have to end early today because I was like, there's no way I have enough to talk about, but we actually made it to time. So we are coming up on the top of the hour. Which is my hard stop, but I feel like I don't know if I've ever answered a question or completed a thought in under 9 minutes. So we should probably, as a safety, stop here. Make your best farts. I'm going to regret this, aren't I? Because you're going to do something terrible with it. All right. Thank you very much for hanging out, y'all. I really appreciate you taking the time. And make sure if you're having a good time, like the video, subscribe to the channel. If you really want to support, there are ways to join. You can subscribe on Twitch. You can hit the join button on YouTube. That kicks in for the show. The money that you send me gets directly reinvested into videos. So allows me to do more and more stuff without having to get corporate sponsorship for it. So, I appreciate you all. And then the other big thing that you can do that really, really helps is just share or like post on your favorite social media network about why you watch me so that I have a clip for my homepage of like people saying nice things about me. But I really appreciate you all, even if you don't do any of that stuff, because I'm just stoked you're here. And thank you for hanging out. Thank you for going on whatever weird adventure I'm on. And I hope you have a great week. Make sure you come back on Thursday. We're going to do an episode. What is my episode on Thursday? It's going to be... Oh, yeah. We're going to do React Suspense in GraphQL with Apollo Client. That's going to be very, very fun. And I'm super pumped about it. It's going to be a good time. So make sure you put that on your calendar. You can actually bookmark it in YouTube now. If you go to the live tab, upcoming episodes are there. You can put a reminder on. And I've got a newsletter. I've got all the things. Just find me somewhere and let's be friends. Thanks, y'all. We will see you next time.